Hey guys, welcome to Beyond the Hustle podcast, All or Nothing. My name's Dylan. To go ahead and find out more about what we got going on here, make sure you like, follow, and subscribe for us today. To the right of me here, I have...
My name's Steven, and we like to talk with local entrepreneurs about their journey to success. And to my right...
Anna Goldwatch.
And today we have our man here, Steven. Steven, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Stephen Michael Martin. I'm an award-winning national drummer and actor. Performed and recorded with Grammy Award winners, CMA Award winners, Emmy Award winners, a #1 hit pop artist. Opened for dozens of international hit bands, and even more than that.
So with that one right there, let's just start off. What would be your top all, like it was an epiphany one, or like, hey, I got this done, a bucket list, if you will?
As far as live gigs or studio recordings, or?
One of each.
Okay. Studio recording, I'd have to say I went down to Berkeley, California, and I recorded with Michael Rosen, who was the producer for Papa Roach, Tesla, Journey, Santana, AFI, Huey Lewis and the News. And what's crazy is when we first got into that studio, it was so hustle, get things set up, go over pre-production discussion with him. And then the next day, it was like 12 to 14 hours of just hammering out song after song. So I never really had a moment where I could like sit quietly and be like, I'm actually recording with arguably one of the greatest producers in California. It wasn't until we finished that session and I went back home and I sat on the couch and kind of decompressed from what we had just done the past week that I was like, I just recorded with arguably one of the greatest producers in California. For recording, that was probably one of the pinnacle moments. As far as live shows, there's just so many, but...
Top three.
Top three. Okay, first one was the first time I ever got to perform on stage with Ashley Barron. Interesting thing about her was we had never met, but she hired me for a show she was doing in California. So she sent me a set list of like 3 hours of material, and for probably 6 or 7 days, I basically just sat there with my laptop, no distractions, huge like stack of papers, just mapping out all the notes I could think of, because I thought like, okay, we haven't even met. I hadn't even had a conversation with her. I got hired for the gig through the gentleman who was already her bass player. So I'm like, I have one shot to wow her and basically like take me into her circle and potentially start touring and recording with her, hopefully, right? And when we were on stage for the first time, I mean, she showed up probably like 5 minutes before we were about to go on. I'm notorious for showing up to shows like 3 hours in advance, get my gear set up, you know, meditate a little bit, stretch, and then go into the performance very clear-headed. So I remember we just briefly like, hey, it's great to meet you, excited for the show, let's get started. And within about 3 minutes of watching her perform, I'm like, this woman is a superstar. I've performed with a lot of people. She had this way of like commanding the audience unlike anything I had ever seen. The way she would strut and interact on stage, I'm like, I don't know where this artist has been my entire life, but this is someone I want to continue to work with. Shortly after that performance, we ended up touring together up until the end of 2019. 2020 happened. We all know what happened with the music industry then. And I believe during that year, she ended up moving to Nashville. So I'm thrilled for her. I'd love to work with her again. But that was one of the top moments performing where I think I just expected it to be an average show working with another artist. And within 2 minutes of watching her, I'm just like, this is probably the next greatest country star.
Nice. Oh, yeah.
So how old were you when you first started playing? And what's the story where that came about? Did you like, Mom and Dad, I need a drum set, or what?
Exactly that. No, so interestingly, it was the opposite of that. As the story goes, way back before I could even develop memories, apparently, my mom worked at a music studio and I was about 3 years old. And the drum teacher who owned that studio saw me with like a pair of my brother's drumsticks, and I was playing on a practice pad. And according to him, he watched me for like maybe 60 seconds. And he came and found my mom, who was also an instructor at that studio, and he said, he's going to be a drummer. Plain and simple. Fast forward 4 years later, I was 7 years old and I started taking drum lessons. He was my drum teacher for over a decade. And the funny thing was, even though my parents saw for a long amount of time I was really interested in playing drums, I had to practice every day for a year until they got me my first basic like 5-piece drum set. I still have the VHS footage somewhere stored in my phone of me getting, because I didn't think I was ever going to get a drum set. Like I practiced a lot in any way I could, but I didn't think I'd ever have one that was my own. And then I believe for my 8th birthday, my dad got me my first like basic white PDP brand drum set, like cheap cymbals, cheap heads, but I was thrilled. I couldn't have been happier because it's like now I can take my practicing really seriously. So that was a little over 24 years ago. I turned 31 this year and I started playing drums when I was 7.
Yeah, for someone who's only 31, the list of accomplishments, I know drummers in their 50s and 60s that haven't accomplished what you've accomplished. It's amazing. It's amazing. How old were you when you were like, you know what, I could do this for a living?
I was thinking about that before I even had my first drum set. When I was in the 2nd grade, I got in trouble every day by my teacher, Mrs. Hall, because I would sit there and just air drum different parts I was thinking about. And she saw that as a distraction, so she would always tell me to stop. But at 7 years old, I had already decided I'm going to be a professional drummer. And this was long. YouTube didn't exist. Social media didn't exist. Internet was still a really brand new thing. If you had it, it was the dial-up where you yeah, and you would have to wait a good 5 or 6 minutes to load one page on a computer that was a miniature dinosaur, right? Even back then, because there was no real access to like watching music on the internet, I was that kid who would turn on MTV and I would just watch rock band after rock band after rock band after rock band, and I'd sit there being like, this is what I'm gonna do. Plain and simple. There was no plan B. There was no backup plan. There was no maybe I should go to college anyway and get a degree in something else just in case. Everything has always been based on me making a living as a drummer.
Now, has anything with that right there ever came about where you were like, everything's going good, and then you get a swift kick, and you're like, maybe this isn't, and then you figure something out to go ahead and make it happen for you?
Tons of times. The best example, so my career was on a very steady incline for years and years and years. 2018, I realized all at once, I'm doing very well. At that point, I had worked with Grammy Award winners, I had worked with CMA Award winners, and it wasn't just the people who had great credentials I was working with. I was making great money. I was touring almost constantly, I was recording almost constantly, and it was the first time ever I started to notice there was quite a demand for me. I had people I had never even met who were reaching out to me being like, tell me your rates, we want you to perform on this album or on this single or on this music video. And I just remember having a moment in my car where I was like working out my finances for the month, and I just thought, I think I've made it. I think for the first time ever, I don't have to worry about money. Things are going well. 2019, things got even better. I did 181 concerts in 1 year. That was just live performances. That wasn't rehearsals, that wasn't recordings, that wasn't music videos, that wasn't everything else I was doing. That was just live shows.
So that's 181 days or?
181 concerts, which means very often I would knock out 2 or 3 concerts in one day.
Wow.
I didn't need sleep. I just needed a constant dosage of coffee. And the routine was simple. I would do a show, I would go home and basically just pass out for however long of a window of time I had. I would wake up and I would go do another show. My energy was so far above the roof, I just felt unstoppable. So at the end of 2019, I remember so vividly, I did my last show with Ashley Barron. It was this huge gathering they had at Crocker Art Museum.
Nice.
I didn't know they had concerts there, but the audience was great, the stage was awesome, the live show was perfect. And at the end of it, we all packed up the instruments, all the gear, and we're like, hey, we're gonna take December off for Christmas, we'll all see each other next year. 2020 happened. To be at that level where I really finally felt like I had made it and exceeded my own expectations, and to watch my entire industry just disintegrate. It was like I was holding it in my hands and it was just sand that fell out of my hands onto the ground. And
It's got to be a hard one.
I didn't know how to handle it because I had never known that level of success, and I've had plenty of failures. I've never watched an entire industry close its doors. And so I thought to myself, I didn't know what else to do. I was kind of almost delusional, as we all were. This will only last 2 weeks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely
Turned into 2 months, and then 2 months turned into 6 months. And this whole time I'm thinking, I don't know what else I'm supposed to do. I've always been a career musician. I was not about to go get some minimum wage job because I feel like I had acclimated to such a level that to go below that would just be a complete disservice to myself. So what ended up happening was I accidentally became a Los Angeles actor. Here's the story.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Here's the story. I was having this was at a point where I was finally accepting my industry is gone and I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. And I saw this casting call for a movie called Brides of Jesus that was being directed by Joe Bartone in Los Angeles. And the way I read it, it sounded to me like they needed a studio drummer for their soundtrack. So I responded to it. I sent them my resume. I said, I've done a lot as a drummer. I've been in plenty of studios. I'd love to work with you. Let me know your thoughts. And I don't know if it was him or the producer of this film, early in the morning the next day, texted me and was like, hey, this looks great. We'd love to meet you. If you want to come down and meet the cast, then let's schedule that for tomorrow. None of them had any idea I didn't live in LA. But I thought, well, I'm in Sacramento. LA is about 6.5 hours away. What else there's nothing else going on.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm gonna make the drive. I drive 6.5 hours from Sacramento down to LA. I get to the house where they're doing auditions. And I think, wait a minute, I'm a studio musician. What do you mean auditions? They were actually looking for an actor to portray a drummer in a punk band. I had done auditions. I had never done a Los Angeles audition.
Yeah.
The world is different down there, as we all know. So I believe his producer gave me a script and he said, we're gonna have you come in and do a cold read with someone else. I said, okay. And I went in and I'm reading through this script and I realized very quickly, none of this is acting for me. These are all real life music situations I've lived through, right? And so we're going back and forth with this dialogue, and there was one moment I actually fucked up, but I did what a musician would do instead of what an actor would do. There's a scene where I pulled out my phone and I'm scrolling through it, and we have this trending viral thing about our band going on. Well, I grabbed my phone, I pulled it out, it fell out of my hand. Now, I don't know what an actor might do in that situation. A musician will basically pave over the mistake so quickly because that happens all the time with live music. We stumble across a note or we miss a count and we basically just keep it moving forward, right? That's what I did because that's what I do as a drummer. Even if I make a mistake, you're probably not going to notice it because I can just basically pave it over. So I'm miming holding my phone and scrolling through it, and I didn't even know the director of this movie had spent probably 20 or 30 years as a musician. So he saw that I was doing what a musician would do instead of what an actor would do, right? Wow. So we finished this audition, and it's very, okay, that was great, we'll let you know. I get into my car and I think, what the fuck was that?
What did I just drive down here for?
I thought I came down here to be the studio drummer on a soundtrack, and now I'm portraying a drummer for a film. And I thought, well, I'm in LA. There's really not any reason I need to go back right away. Let me enjoy the city a little bit. So I drive to the Griffith Observatory and park my car, and I think I'm gonna walk the trail up to the Hollywood sign. And literally, almost like a scene out of the movie, when I'm halfway up this trail and I can see the Hollywood sign, my phone buzzes, and I look at it, and it's the producer for this film, and they say, hey, we'd like to offer you the role of Snare, which the name later got turned into Tuna, but originally they called me Snare in this film. And I thought, okay, so I have a gig. Later on, I talked to the director. It turns out he did need a studio drummer for the soundtrack of this movie. And he's just like, would you also be interested in playing drums for it? I'm just like, yeah, of course. So I got my first studio deal in LA and my first acting deal basically on a whim, not even knowing what I was doing. And that was kind of my like, okay, I dropped from having great success down into feeling like I had absolutely nothing at all. And then that's kind of what ended up getting me accidentally into movies.
So with that right there, so you went off and we're doing music, everything was going well, and then it comes down to, hey, I don't know what the hell to do anymore. Let me go ahead and try something else. But you stayed in your lane on it too for something that you knew. Yeah. And you just decided, I have nothing else to lose, nothing to gain. Let's go ahead and go. And the worst thing is I could gain an opportunity. So that's awesome.
So what happened after that? That's what I want to know. What's the next part of the story?
So
awesome.
We finished the film Brides of Jesus. And I remember on our last day of filming, I did my final scene and I walked out onto the director's patio and I kind of just sat there outside and I had a moment of like, is this it? Was that the start and the beginning of my movie career? Like, now what? And I basically just went home. And that film, I think, ended up appearing in probably over 100 film festivals. It won probably 44 awards.
Wow.
And that was my first eye-opener of like, oh, I might have something here. I was always obsessed with movies as a kid. It wasn't just that I would watch them. I would analyze the characters. I had the longest list of favorite actors for varieties of different reasons, but I had never thought about doing that as a career. Everything was always, I just want to be a drummer. And I think the reason for that was I was surrounded by musicians as I was growing up. I never knew any film actors. I knew some kids who were in theater. I didn't know any people who had actually been in movies. So the thought had never occurred to me that it's like I can basically take what I'm good at and bring that to the screen, and hopefully in the process, people will give me money for it. So Brides of Jesus was the first eye-opener of just like, oh, I think I may have accidentally stumbled upon a whole new avenue. I can still be a drummer, but I can also be in movies. Since then, I think I've done probably a dozen. One of them is premiering at Tower Theater in 6 days.
What's the name of that one?
Conjuring Tapes by Wolfcat Films. Arguably, probably one of the smaller parts I've done, but that's probably the most fun I've had on set for a movie. I won't give too much away, but they had us in this like enormous abandoned barn, and we were cult members who got to witness a sacrifice.
That's cool.
Hey, not too far about what happens here in the Central Valley.
Right.
So, what was your big break? When what was your first paying gig that like opened up all the doors?
Oh, I remember so vividly the first time people actually gave me money to do what I was passionate about. What's crazy is, started playing drums at 7 years old. I don't think I got my first payday for a show until I was 18. 11 years of putting in the footwork, and I always wanted to make a living, but once I hit 18, my eyes were opened. Like, now I have to. Money isn't a luxury. It's becoming something that I need to live. And I had just signed my first contract with a record label, And I was originally never supposed to do this show because they already had some other drummer who was on their roster. He dropped out probably a week before they had this show. And I remember I was in the library of my high school talking to a girl I had a crush on. And I get a call from this label manager, and I answer it, and he's just like, do you think you can have the set list nailed down, good to go in 7 days? I said, yes. He said, okay. So the band they were opening for was Anvil, who...
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
They're awesome.
It's
It's the biggest band in the world that never got their
right.
break.
And I had never heard of them until I saw the documentary, The Story of Anvil, and talk about guys who were just like hustling and hustling and hustling and didn't really have that breakthrough, I think, until the film came out. And they were on tour. We were an opening act for one show of theirs. So I remember I had never played the Boardwalk in Orangevale before, but to me as a kid, still in high school, that was the holy grail. I remember driving past that place with my grandparents as a kid and thinking, you gotta be somebody to play at that venue, right? I had never even been inside. Next thing I knew, I had a show there. I think for my first paying show ever, I was paid like $18. It was not a great...
You got to open for Anvil.
Right. But I was 18, and I remember I put some gas in my car, I got McDonald's, and I had a little bit of money for groceries to take home. And I was on cloud 9 because it was the first someone actually paid me to play drums. And then from there, it started to open up more and more and more. But that was my first people will give me money for this? I've been doing it for free for over 10 years.
So the chick that you had a crush on in high school, you still keep in contact with her?
No. I did for a little while after high school, but she lived in Irvine, California, and I think I lived in Elk Grove at the time. So it was we would text all day, but she was studying to be a doctor, and I was like a kid getting his foot in the door in the music industry. So now when I look back, I'm like, yeah, that was never gonna go anywhere, but
Yeah.
that's that.
First gig opening up for Anvil. I mean, you guys are probably too young to know who Anvil is.
Yeah, no idea.
Or that type of music. But yeah, to me, Anvil was always the band that you were waiting for them to just pop. Yeah. Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, watch the documentary if you haven't watched it. So before we were talking, and you said this month was an incredibly busy month for you. What do you have going
on? Tonight, I'm going to be on the award-winning reality show Love After Lockup.
Oh, really?
That's going to be streaming globally on WeTV.
Wait, did you do time, or are you going to date a chick that was locked up?
So neither, but that's the big question. Everyone wants to know, what am I doing on this show if I was never locked up? And the only thing I can say right now is they have to watch it to see what I did on that set. The funny thing was, they gave us no script. It's all unscripted. And they gave me very, very, very little details as far as what they were doing in this scene. They just asked me to be on set. And then when I got there, I talked to one of the other, I don't know if you'd call him an actor or a reality, I don't know what the terminology is. But I was in a room with him and I was just like, do you know what we're doing today? And he's just like, no, not really. And so I went in. But I learned something very valuable in this moment. When in doubt, lean into what you know and what you're good at. That's all I could do in that moment. And so I thought about it and I'm like, okay, I know that I am way too confident for my own good, and I'm pretty extroverted even when I'm talking to complete strangers. So that's all I did in the scene. I was completely over the top. My energy was through the roof. And I had the two guys I was talking to breaking character every few seconds because I was so off the wall with all of these ideas. One of my ideas, they asked me what would be, a good idea for a dating app with people in your community? And I said, I got $1 billion idea for you right now. You can have it for free. What if we start a dating app where you don't see anyone's faces, you only see their crotches? Now that's a market no one has tapped into yet. And that was their response too. So That'll be on tonight at 8 p.m. 6 days from now, April 10th, will be the premiere at Tower Theater for Conjuring Tapes. And then the last movie I did in LA, another full feature that was directed by Joe Bartone. It's a comedy called My Movie starring Paul Dano. And it's the first movie I've ever done where I'm 3 characters. I start off as Printer John, and then I transform into Robot Bear from prehistoric Mars, and then they turn me into a fake Paul Dano so I can swindle someone's rich uncle out of hundreds of thousands of dollars so he can fund something for us. You want to talk about doing a movie that was a trip? That's the first movie I've done where like halfway through I'm like, what the fuck is this? What are we doing? Because it's a very straightforward story, but one thing this director is really good at is he finds like the most offbeat people you typically wouldn't expect to see in a movie and kind of just puts them all together, and it's like, let's see what happens. The first full feature I did with him was called Everything Will Be Fine in the End, and that's what I noticed.
I've seen that one.
Yeah. I looked at myself at that time in my life and I'm like, I don't look like a Hollywood actor, right? And then I looked at the rest of the cast of this movie and I'm like, none of these are people you would expect to see in Hollywood.
But those are the best movies.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's because most of this movie is based on the underbelly of LA. It's not the flashing lights and the Hollywood Walk of Fame. It's like the nastiest ghettos and the people you wouldn't typically expect to see walking around Los Angeles.
I think those make the best films. Right now, it's time for the Hustle Hot Seat. We've got 60 seconds of us throwing some questions at you.
Okay.
Say the first thing that comes to mind. All right? All right, let's do this. What's something that you pretend to understand but actually don't? Rapid fire.
I don't know.
Okay.
I should know what I don't know, but I don't know what I don't know.
I always say that all the time. I don't know what I don't know.
Right. Something I pretend to know a lot about and I don't.
How about this one right here? What's something that's embarrassing that you're low-key amazing at?
Something embarrassing that I'm low-key amazing at. Socializing with strangers. That's a skill I feel like people in my generation don't have because we're all looking at our phones. I will talk to just about anyone at any time about anything. And I think on the outside it should be perceived as that's embarrassing, but I think because my energy is so high in any kind of situation, I like that about myself. Yeah.
Ugh.
What's a luxury you refuse to live without no matter how broke you are?
Starbucks. I
have that habit.
I am that guy who will go to Starbucks and I will spend $9 on a coffee. And I won't feel any guilt about it because when I have that first sip, I'm like, this is worth every penny. I can have a net worth of 0 and I'm going to scrounge up $9 so I can go get my coffee. That's my one vice.
Love it.
Got that one down. What's the dumbest thing you've ever done to lose money?
The dumbest thing I've ever done to lose money. This is a little bit of a dark one. I'm not proud of it, but I was very young and didn't quite know what I was doing in my industry yet. Burning bridges with people. I did that a lot in my very late teens and my early 20s because I had a much more judgmental mindset. And I remember working with someone and literally thinking to myself, they're not a star. And so I would ghost them. I would like basically cast off any work from them because it didn't reach my standards at the time. And I think no matter what industry you're in, no matter what your talent or your skill or your profession is, if you're burning bridges with people, that is by far the dumbest habit you can possibly have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If your success story was turned into a Netflix series, who would you want to play you?
If they had a really high budget, Johnny Depp, because I think he would nail it. If they had more of that kind of indie, charismatic, artsy desire for the character, Paul Dano. Because I love Paul Dano, and I think he kind of looks like me, just a little bit. He's also like probably one of the most underrated Hollywood actors in the world right now.
What's the weirdest compliment you ever received?
Am I allowed to say X-rated things on this podcast? Is that okay?
Sure.
Yep.
So we'll just bleep it if we need to.
Yes.
A woman who was deeply in love with me at the time told me that she masturbated to my YouTube videos. There's nothing X-rated on my YouTube videos. It's me playing drums. It's music videos.
Already has a kink.
And she didn't say it as a joke. She said it with a lot of sincerity, like this is what I was doing earlier today. That has stuck with me for years. And no one has said that before or since. I'm searching for the girl again.
Guess
Who
what?
would,
Okay.
Someone needs to step it up.
With that one right there, do you have any parting words for the audience or advice you want people to hear? Young up and coming people, entrepreneurs, people trying to get where they want to go in life?
Yeah, I cannot stress this enough. Get off your phone and go out and talk to people.
Yes, great advice.
Seriously, like I know the big thing people say in any industry is, well, you got to network, right? But people aren't doing that. Talk to strangers, right? Strike up conversation with people who you notice in public probably have something in common with you. Go out and network. You're not going to build some of the best relationships in your life, whether it's business or romantic or anything else, by looking at your phone. You're not. You have to go out and talk to people.
So time for 2 truths and a hustle. Tell us 2 truths about yourself and 1 lie. Don't give us the answer yet.
2 truths and a lie? Yeah. At one point, I wanted to be a pro basketball player. I have never been in love, and I have a goldfish at home named Jaws.
All right. Final question here. Looking back, what is one early decision that made the biggest impact on your success?
Probably picking up my phone and calling someone. That's the thing. People procrastinate a lot in our generation where connecting instantly is easier than ever before, but people see messages, they see emails, and they put it off, and it starts off as, I'll get to this in 2 hours, and then suddenly it's 2 days and 2 weeks later. I can vividly remember altering the path of my life by making a phone call, and then after that, showing up at the house for my first major audition. Both of those were things I had to do here in reality, not things that I did on my phone.
Okay.
Well, guys,
Loved having you.
Thank you. That's good.
Amazing. We look forward to
Yeah.
having you back in the future when you're a star, but when you're a mega star. Don't
I mean,
forget-
you
don't
guys-
forget
When you
about
grow up
us.
a little more,
You guys
Steven.
are the real stars. It's just a privilege to be here.
Thank you. We'll pay you later for saying that.
Exactly.
And
A
we're
whole $18.
thank you guys for watching Beyond the Hustle All or Nothing podcast here with Steven and Anna. We appreciate you guys and
And
hope you have a
Dylan.
great day.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Catch you guys next
Thumbs
time.
ups.